Okay, thanks very much, Kay, for inviting me to do this session. So I've called this rather grandiosely, really, Alive in a Living Universe. It could have been more prosaic. What I've been doing during the lockdown is a bit of a description of what I'm going to be talking about as well. And one of the things that I've been doing is getting into the Romantic poets, particularly Gerald Manley Hopkins and William Wordsworth. And one of the things that Wordsworth talks about is the great benefits that can happen just through imagining yourself, taking yourself back to a beautiful place that you've been in. So, for example, in his poem in Tintern Abbey, he recollects where he was 5 years ago and the kind of pleasant feelings he has when he recollects himself in this environment. So what I'd like us to try out for this little 15 minutes or so meditation is just to imagine yourself in a beautiful natural environment, what you might think of as a special place for you. Yeah. Doesn't matter how far away this is or how long ago that you were actually there. So we're just going to evoke this place and immerse ourselves in this place in our imagination for a few minutes before I start the talk. So yeah, just making ourselves comfortable. And just tuning in, first of all, to the space that we're in at the moment. Feeling the chair or the seat that we're sitting on. The ground beneath us, supporting us in our position. It's probably helpful to close our eyes. And then just starting to bring to mind this place based on a memory of being there. So imagining ourselves in this place. Maybe we're sitting down. Having a sense of the earth of this place beneath us. And beginning to build up an internal sense, a picture, a feeling of this place. Beginning to notice the details of this place. What's the ground like around us? The grass, bushes, trees. What's the light like on the ground? Is there a play of sunlight and shade? What sort of day is it? What sort of light? Is there water nearby? Is there a stream? Or is there a bigger body of water like a loch or like the sea? And if there is water in our image, maybe there's a sound that goes with it. So recalling that sound. And if there's no water in our place, then recalling the sounds of our place. Maybe wind and grass or trees, sound of bird song. So having a sense also of the sky. So what's the sky look like? Is it clear? Is it cloudy? Is the sun shining? Or is it nighttime? So if we're in woodland, maybe we sense the sky through the canopy above us. I'm getting a sense of the spaciousness of the sky. Which gives a sense to the spaciousness of the landscape around us. So now in this place, let's tune in to our breath, feeling the breath as it comes into our body, filling our lungs, and breathing out. So having a sense that we're breathing in from the place that we're in, breathing in the fragrance of this place, and breathing out into our place. And with the out breath, you can have a sense of letting go, of relaxing into the space that we're imagining that we're in. And as we breathe in, we're breathing in. We imagine we're breathing in the life, the energy, the atmosphere of this place. So if we find our attention wandering, then just gently coming back to our breath, back to our place. Breathing in from a special place we're imagining, and breathing out into it. Immersing ourselves in this landscape. So now if we begin to let go of the sense of this place we're imagining ourselves in, letting it slowly fade away. And returning to the room, the space that we're sitting in, feeling the seat below us. And letting our eyes open if they're closed, and coming back into the room. Okay, it's hard to tell on Zoom if everyone's ready, but I'm going to assume that everyone is. So I'll get started on the talk, Alive in a Living Universe, or what I've been doing during lockdown. So I gave Kay a quote for the publicity for this talk, and this is a quote from Sangharakshita. So I'll start off with this. So it's from the seminar he did on the nature of existence, a chapter in the Three Jewels. So this is a paraphrase of what he says there. One needs to see things as alive rather than dead. It's as though when one experiences more life within oneself, one feels the life in other things. You feel everything is alive. Nature is alive. The universe is alive. Because you are alive yourself, you have empathy with what is alive in the world around you. And I would also say that if you feel the life in other things, if you feel the life in nature, you feel more alive in yourself. It's a symbiotic relationship that we can have with nature, with the world around us. And conversely, you could say, if you feel dead in yourself, then you feel that deadness in the world around you. So this cut-offness, this alienation, this deadness is, in my experience, when I've been in this sort of state, is a state of suffering. And for me, one of the characteristics of what Buddhists call dukkha, or suffering, is where, for whatever reason, I feel isolated. I feel cut off from others, from nature, from the world around me. John Muir, who is all about the joy of connecting with nature, writes of this. He says, "Most people are on the world, not in it, have no conscious sympathy or relationship to anything about them, undiffused, separate, rigidly alone, like marbles of polished stone, touching but separate." Now, I know that feelings of isolation, cut-offness, have become something we've had to deal with in our current situation of our coronavirus world. Lockdown, social distancing has been a real challenge to the socialness, that feeling of being connected that we all really need as human beings. So in the so-called new normal, we found Zoom. Like many others, I didn't know much about Zoom before March, but now I've spent a reasonable amount of time on Zoom. These guys must have been making a fortune who have started up Zoom. But like many others, I've been Zooming as a way of talking to others or meeting in groups. This is my first Zoom talk, but yeah, this is part of our new world. And one of the things that struck me was it's all happened so quickly. Yeah, I mean, just going back to the start of the year, we had no idea that this is the world that we'd be living in now. When we made our New Year resolutions, when we made plans for the year, we had no idea that this would be the way things would be. Yeah. But I don't know about you, but I did make some New Year resolution. And one of the New Year's resolutions I made, the actual lockdown gave me much more opportunity to practice it than maybe I otherwise would have had. And one of my New Year resolutions was to spend a short time, maybe just 15 minutes, if that's all the time I had, 10 minutes, a short time each day, every day in nature to appreciate one thing in more depth than I would normally experience it. Now, this is something that I do anyway, but I wanted to do it a bit more consciously and a bit more regularly to actually see it as a practice, a bit like a meditation practice, yeah, something that I would do on a daily, regular basis. And I took my inspiration from this from a film I saw a few years ago, and this was a film. It was a film a woman was making about dying from cancer. So she did a kind of video diary, really, of her journey, with well, basically up to just before she died. And you can imagine this at times was pretty heart-wrenching, and it was also very joyful as well. It went through the whole gamut of human emotions, intensified by the fact of death, the impending death that she was moving towards. And she interviewed a few people who were in a similar situation to her. And one guy she interviewed, and this really stayed with me, was a guy who had motor neuron disease. So apparently he could die any day, as of course we all can. But for him, it was a real distinct possibility that he could die at any time. But at the same time, he was well enough to work. So he carried on working, going into London to an office and working. And one of his practices that he did on a daily basis was to go out into nature, which was mainly a park next door to his work, and he would go and study an aspect of nature. Yeah. Might be a leaf, a blade of grass, and he describes a 10-minute evocation of watching a slug crawl across. No, they don't crawl, do they? Slither. A slug slither across a leaf. Yeah, and the whole 10 minutes it took the slug to move from one end of the leaf to the other. Yeah, and it sounds a bit kind of dull, doesn't it? A bit boring watching a slug slither across a leaf. But he said that the level of presence that he had, he was so totally absorbed in this. Nothing, the world around ceased to exist. And he was so absorbed in it, he just described it as moments of pure joy. Yeah, watching a slug slither across a leaf. So you don't have to be in a beautiful place like I am to spend a bit of time appreciating nature. You can do it anywhere, because he was in the heart of London. So yeah, that's what I decided to do. And of course, with the lockdown, I've had loads of time to do this. Yeah. So I've not been spending 10, 15 minutes doing this. I've been spending hours and days sometimes just being out, appreciating aspects of nature. Now, before I go further, I just want to acknowledge and appreciate how difficult the world of coronavirus has been for many people. Yeah, the sense of isolation that people have had to struggle with, the sense of uncertainty that people have had to struggle with. Yeah. And I also appreciate how fortunate I am to live in a rural environment. I live in the village of Callander, just south of Callander. But for me, the daily ongoing explorations of nature have been enriching, and more than I think I've ever felt. I've felt alive in a living universe. It is a description of my experience over the past few months. Yesterday I was out walking on one of my favourite walks that I've got to know since March. And this is the old woods alongside the Garav Ushku. Yeah? That's my probably poor attempt at the Gaelic pronunciation of something doesn't at all look like the Garish Ushku. Yeah? But the Garish Ushku translates as the rough water. Yeah? And the rough water is a body of water that flows out of Loch Lubnig, which you pass through to if you approach Danacosia from the south, and flows into the River Lenny, which flows through Callander, and then ultimately out into the Firth of Forth. And where I stay is right on the edge of the Highlands. It's on the Highland boundary fault. So that's one of the things I love about Callander. It's like you're on the edge of something. Yeah? There's the Highlands to the north, and then there's the lowlands to the south. So I like the sense of being on the edge of two different lands. Yeah? So the Garavushku is just moving into the Highlands. Yeah? And the woodland around here is really lovely. It's a kind of old native woodland of birch, oak, hazel, rowan, to name a few of the trees, alongside the river. And the old railway line, which is now a cycleway, goes up through these woodlands. So walking and spending time on this riverside in these woods since March has just given me a deeper appreciation of the ever-changing nature of nature. And when I was thinking about this talk, it was just a series of images over the past few months, just scroll past like a movie. So I'm just going to give you some snapshots. So going back into March, so the cold winds from the north, blowing from the snowy flanks of Ben Ledi, viewed through skeletal trees. 20 minutes watching a dipper foraging for food on the riverbed. Early in April, the first harbingers of spring, brave little woodland flowers, the yellow celandine, the little white wooden anemones, the beautiful little yellow pansies, all showing their faces to a world which still feels very wintry, but it's a sign of new growth arising in nature. Then moving into May, and what a month May was this year. Yeah, it was such a beautiful month. I was out quite a lot at dawn during the month of May, and going up into these woodlands was just something else, really. There was a riot of birdsong. Yeah. Yeah, I think a riot's the word. Yeah. All the warblers had arrived. Yeah. And I had set myself a task of learning all the different warblers and all the different songs and differentiating the different little brown birds, which are the warblers. And of course, there was the woodpeckers, the wrens really giving it for such a little bird, and the cuckoos arriving. So a real riot of birdsong. And then there was the vivid intensity of all those fresh greens, yeah. So vivid, so alive, so vibrant. And then as May wore on, then the bluebells started, carpets of bluebells. Then moving into June and things quietening down a bit, there was the white clouds of hawthorn blossom along the bushes along the old railway line, the pinks and whites of the dog roses filling the air with perfume, the vivids of green of spring maturing into the duller, richer greens of summer. And now we're in July and it's all changing again. And one of the main things I'm noticing in the woods now is how quiet it's become. Yeah, it's moving into the stillness of midsummer. The birds have largely stopped singing. Yeah, the wren still is quite vocal, but the main spring songster in these woods is the willow warbler, and they've stopped altogether. I haven't heard one for weeks. Yeah, but they're still there. Yeah, furtive little brown shadows flitting through the trees. Yesterday I was out, I was going to say my woodland, but it's not my woodland. Yesterday I was out in the woodland, and yesterday was a dappled day. There was the play of light and shadow as sunlight filtered through the canopy above, the shimmering dance of light and shadow, browns and blacks shimmering in the river. Dapple, what a lovely word. Yeah, goes back to the 16th century Norse, apparently. Yeah, and it was mainly used in the 18th century, the era of the Jesuit poet Gerald Manley Hopkins. And dapple was one of his favourite words. In his poem Pied Beauty, he talks of the glory be to God for dappled things. So he found beauty in the interweaving of light and darkness, of the natural contrasts that abound in nature and also in the human heart. Joy, sadness, despair, pain, pleasure, happiness. So I've been reading a bit about him in lockdown downtime, and I've been drawn in a bit to this rather sensitive, at times tortured, romantic poet and Jesuit. He isn't immediately accessible. I can't imagine really reading out one of his poems before meditation on a retreat, because people will be scratching their heads, wondering what he was on about. You've got to study him a little bit, but he certainly has repaid studying. So on a retreat, I might read something by Mary Oliver, who's more immediately accessible, or do a reading from John Muir, where you feel a more immediate resonance. So key to getting into Gerald Manley Hopkins are his theories of inscape and in-stress. So you'll have to indulge me while I talk a little about inscape and in-stress. So inscape, and these are, as far as I understand it, I'm certainly no poetic scholar here, but as far as I understand it, inscape is the uniqueness of things, their own unique individual identity. Each thing, animal, being has the capacity or the urge to grow into its full-grown uniqueness. Or to put it much more poetically in his words, as kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame, each mortal thing does one thing and the same. Selves, goes itself, myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. This uniqueness is not a static self. Notice he uses the word selves. It is a growth into a potential or a dissolution back into the earth. It's both spring and autumn, a dynamic, ever-changing process of being. So key to this is a real appreciation for the detail, a kind of mindful, empathic, wholehearted focus of all our senses receptive to the uniqueness of things. I used to have what I now feel is at least a partially mistaken view, and that is that to label individual things in nature is to objectify them too much, because in so doing you lose the freshness and the wonder of not knowing. So just to quote Wordsworth here. Sweet is the law which nature brings. Our meddling intellect misshapes the beauteous forms of things we murder to dissect. Enough of science and of art. Close up those barren leaves, i.e., close up your books. Come forth and bring with you a heart that watches and receives. Now, actually, I agree with Wordsworth, I always have done. But there's a bit of a nuance here. I fear that the fear of murdering to dissect has too often, for me, led to a vague, slightly spaced out state of drifting through nature, not really noticing anything at all much, because I want to just allow things to take things in, without labeling them. I had a bit of a rude awakening with this, which is when I first did a painting retreat. So the painting retreat was led by Tejani, who still leads our painting retreats at Danakosha. And I hadn't a clue about painting, but I joined in. And I painted a tree in a lochside. And after I'd proudly produced this tree in a lochside with its leaves, she said to me, "So, show me, where's the blue in the loch in front of you?" So I had painted loch blue, yeah. I'd painted tree brown and leaves green. I'd totally missed the nuance. I hadn't noticed what actually was in front of me, yeah. I was painting by assumption. I hadn't really noticed things at all, yeah. So to notice, we have to, I think, make an effort to notice. And to notice the inscape of things, their unique individual characteristics. What colour is the loch, really? What colour is the tree bark? What colour are the leaves? Yeah? Not what our assumptions of what the colour is, but what is actually going on. Yeah? And that is a practice to notice what is there. This is something artists and writers specifically train themselves in. So one thing I've been doing, as I said, is training myself to tell wobblers apart. Previously, it was all just wonderful birdsong. Yeah, I couldn't tell a thing from a thing. Yeah, but slowly, I've started to be able to willow warblers, from garden warblers, from blackcaps. The particular challenge has been identifying blackcaps from garden warblers. They do sound very much the same. So it's really starting to notice, well, what is the difference? What is the detail? And this for me hasn't felt like murdering to dissect. Yeah? It has felt more like a deeper penetration into how things actually are. And I've delighted in the differences that have emerged through a greater noticing. Yeah? And this would come as no surprise to Gerald Manley Hopkins, who believed that if you penetrate into the inscape of things and being, the quality of what he called in-stress comes into being. So what is in-stress? People get hung up on the word stress, I think, with this word. It's not the most inviting word in some ways, yeah? I mean, I've not quite sure I fully got the meaning of the word in-stress myself, but as far as I understand it, it has two main meanings. Firstly, it is the energy of being by which all things come into being. For Hopkins, being a devout Jesuit, this has quite a lot to do with God. Yeah? It's seeing God through penetrating into the inscape of things. For example, Hopkins loved bluebells. Yeah? He tries to define the essence, the inscape of the bluebell's beauty, penetrating to the energy of being they are manifesting. They come in falls of sky colour, washing the brows and slacks of the land with vein blue. They come in falls of sky colour. That's a wonderful evocation of a field of bluebells. I do not think I've ever seen anything more beautiful than the bluebell I have been looking at. I know the beauty of the Lord by it. Its inscape is mixed of strength and grace. Secondly, in-stress is the sensation, the felt sense of our inscape, our own individuality, our own individual uniqueness, as it were, appreciating the inscape in the world around us, which can lead to a sense of resonance of our inscape with the inscape around us. And it can lead to a perception of a deeper unity, which gives meaning to all external forms. So this idea of in-stress, through delving into nature's inscape, was an exciting idea for me when I read about it, because it does resonate with my own experience of the spiritual possibilities of cultivating mutual resonance with nature. So Hopkins describes the process of in-stress, this deeper intuition into a unity, as either sudden, like a flaming out, where the world seems suddenly charged with divine grandeur, or in a more slow and gradual manner, gathering to a greatness from small particles of presence. Gathering to a greatness from small particles of presence. I read that out twice because I find it really evocative. Looking at the detail is looking at small particles of presence, which if you stay with them, dwell with them, gather into a greatness. So I'm going to read something by a Christian mystic. I'm reading more from Christianity than I'm from Buddhism in this particular talk. So this is something I often quote on photography retreats when we're talking about looking. So this is Evelyn Underhill. Look for a little time in a special and undivided manner at some simple external thing. This object of our contemplation may be almost anything we please. A picture, a statue, a tree, a distant hillside, a growing plant, running water, little living things. Look then at this thing which you have chosen. Clearly yet tranquilly let go of the messages which countless other aspects of the world are sending, and so concentrate your whole attention on this one act of loving sight that all other objects are excluded from the conscious field. Do not think, but as it were, pour out your personality towards it. Let your soul be in your eyes. Almost at once, this new method of perception will reveal unsuspected qualities in the external world. First, you will perceive about you a strange and deepening quietness, a slowing down of our feverish mental time. Next, you will become aware of a heightened significance, an intensified existence in the thing at which you look. As you, with all your consciousness, lean out towards it, an answering current will meet yours. It seems as though the barrier between its life and your own, between subject and object, had melted away. You are merged with it in an act of true communion, and you know the secret of its being deeply and unforgettably. So, in the terms I've been talking about of Gerald Manley Hopkins, this is a great description of appreciation of the inscape of things, leading to a state of in-stress. In Buddhist terms, a feeling of the interconnectedness of us with the world around us, so strong that the boundaries between self and nature, self and other, shimmer and dissolve. So this leads me to perhaps my favourite John Muir quote. The sun shines not on us, but in us. The rivers flow not past, but through us. Thrilling, tingling, vibrating every fibre and cell of the substance of our bodies, making them glide and sing. The trees wave and the flowers bloom in our bodies, as well as our souls, and every bird song, wind song, and tremendous storm song of the rocks in the heart of the mountains is our song, our very own, and sings our love. So being alive in a living universe is paying attention, sensitive to the inscape of all that is around us. I've been talking about nature, but of course you can include everything in this. You can include people in this. We all have our inscapes, and through getting to know the inscapes of others, we maybe get to know ourselves more in that process. Through appreciating the inscape in the world around us, we get to know ourselves more, our own inner landscapes. The living mountain. As I penetrate more deeply into the mountain's life, I penetrate also into my own. As I penetrate more deeply into the mountain's life, I penetrate also into my own. The thing to be known grows with the knowing. Now, in talking to people over the years on retreats, and also in just reading around what nature writers talk about, I've come to realize that many of us have these sorts of intuitions, these sorts of experiences, and maybe these are one of the reasons why we are drawn to a spiritual life. And as maybe we get an intuition, a sense of the boundaries between us and the world around us shimmering, dissolving into an experience, or at least an intuition of interconnectedness, we might realize something else. It feels not only as if we're looking at the universe of which we are part, but the alive universe, which is part of us, is looking at us. You ever had an experience of this, where you feel that suddenly it's not just you looking at a tree, but the tree is in some way aware of you? Or does that just sound like a fantasy? So let's leave it there.